Good evening and welcome to Embers and Pages, where we retell the world's most beautiful stories in a voice meant for rest. How are you feeling tonight? I hope you've been treated gently by the hours. If you've been caught between what you want and what you should want, between passion and propriety, you've arrived at the right place. Here, we set down those impossible choices. We simply listen, and we let ourselves be still. If this is your first time with us, you're welcome here. If you're returning, I'm grateful you came back. A small request: if this story soothes your restless heart, perhaps leave a like, share it with someone wrestling with their own quiet sorrows, or leave a comment telling us which classic speaks to you. You are part of this circle, and it matters that you're here. Tonight, we travel to Imperial Russia, to the world of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, published in 1878. This is a story written in snow and train smoke and ballroom candlelight. It asks what happens when a woman, brilliant, beautiful, trapped in a loveless marriage, meets a man who awakens everything she's been taught to bury. Anna Karenina is a story of two paths. One leads through passionate love that society will never forgive, the other through quiet devotion to land and family and simple truth. One ends in tragedy, one ends in peace. And between them, Tolstoy shows us the terrible cost of being fully alive in a world that demands we stay half asleep. Let's ready ourselves for sleep now. Let the light fade around you, or switch it off entirely. Lower the volume until my voice is barely there, just a whisper you have to lean into, helping your thoughts finally settle. Sink deeper into wherever you're lying. Feel the weight leave your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Pull warmth around you. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Breathe in slowly. Hold, release, and again. You have nowhere to be, nothing to prove, no decisions to make. Just this, just breath, just listening. If sleep takes you before the story ends, don't resist. That's exactly right. The story will wait. It's been waiting since 1878. Another night won't matter. Your rest is what matters now. Our story begins at a Moscow railway station on a frozen winter morning, where steam clouds the platform and a train pulls in from Petersburg. And Anna Karenina steps down onto the snow-dusted ground, still believing her life is settled, still thinking she knows who she is and what she wants. But fate, dressed in a military coat, is already watching. The air smells of coal smoke and winter. The tracks stretch toward an unseen horizon, and everything is about to change. In the winter of 1873, Anna Arkadyevna Karenina lived what anyone in Petersburg society would have called a perfect life. She was 30 years old, beautiful in that effortless way that turns heads without trying, intelligent, graceful, moving through the grand halls of the capital with the confidence of someone who belonged. Her husband, Alexei Alexandrovich Karenin, was a high-ranking government official, respected, austere, 20 years her senior. Their home was elegant, their position was secure, everything was exactly as it should be. Anna had married Alexei when she was 18, as young women of her class did, as her family arranged, as society expected. It had not been a love match, but it had been a good match. He was stable, successful, a man of principle and position. She was beautiful, well-bred, intelligent enough to be interesting at dinner parties, but not so opinionated as to be troublesome. They fit together in the way that well-made furniture fits in a well-designed room, appropriate, tasteful, functional. They had one child, a son named Seryaja, 8 years old, with dark hair and his mother's eyes. Anna adored him with a fierce, protective tenderness that surprised even herself. When she held him, when she read to him at bedtime, when she watched him sleep, something in her chest expanded with a love so overwhelming it frightened her. He was the center of her world, the one pure, uncomplicated joy in her life. Her days followed a predictable rhythm. Mornings were for correspondence and household management. Afternoons for social calls, charity work, the endless rounds of visiting that Petersburg society required. Evenings were for dinners, theater, balls, the glittering performances of upper-class life. She played her role perfectly. She smiled at the right moments, said the right things, wore the right gowns. Everyone admired her. Everyone envied her. She was the model of what a respectable married woman should be. But sometimes, late at night, lying beside her husband in their bed, listening to his even breathing, Anna felt something she could not name. An emptiness, a restlessness, a sense that she was living someone else's life, reading lines from someone else's script. She would push the feeling away, tell herself she was being foolish, ungrateful. She had everything. What more could she possibly want? And then the telegram came. Her brother, Prince Stepan Arkadyevich Oblonsky Stiva, as everyone called him, lived in Moscow with his wife Dolly and their 5 children. Stiva was charming, affectionate, perpetually in debt, and had just been caught having an affair with the family's former governess. The household was in chaos. Dolly was devastated, threatening to leave, to take the children, to end the marriage. The children were crying. The servants were whispering. Everything was falling apart. Anna, as the older sister, as the one who had made the respectable marriage, as the one who understood duty and propriety, was summoned to fix it. "Please come," the telegram said. "Only you can help. Dolly trusts you. Please, Anna." She prepared to leave immediately. Alexei approved. It was appropriate for a sister to help in such a crisis, and it would only be a few days. Seryaja cried when she told him. She held him close, promising to return soon, to bring him presents, to tell him all about the journey. She kissed his forehead, breathed in the little boy's smell of him, soap and grass and something sweet, and tried to ignore the tightness in her throat. The journey to Moscow took the night. Anna sat in her private compartment on the train, watching the darkness rush past the window, the occasional lights of small stations, the vast snow-covered emptiness of the Russian countryside. The train rocked and swayed, the sound of the wheels rhythmic and hypnotic. She thought about Stiva, about his weakness, about how love and desire could lead people to do things that destroyed what they should have cherished. She thought about Dolly, about the pain of betrayal, about trying to hold together a life that someone else had shattered. She thought about marriage, about duty, about the promises people make and break. She did not think about her own marriage. She did not let herself. The train pulled into Moscow in the morning, steam hissing, brakes screeching, passengers gathering their things. Anna stepped onto the platform in her elegant traveling coat, her maid following with the luggage. The Moscow station was chaos, people rushing, vendors calling, the smell of coal smoke and winter air. She stood still for a moment, orienting herself, breathing in the cold. And then she saw him. A man in a military uniform, standing with an older woman, clearly waiting for someone. He was tall, handsome in that effortless way some men are, with dark hair and an easy confidence. He was smiling at something the older woman had said, but then his eyes caught Anna's across the platform, and the smile faded. He stared. She stared back, confused, suddenly self-conscious. There was something in his expression, intensity, recognition, though they had never met, something that made her heart beat faster. The older woman turned. It was Countess Vronskaya, whom Anna knew slightly from Petersburg, and the man, her son, Count Alexei Vronsky, Anna remembered now. They had been introduced once briefly at some reception. He was famous in certain circles. Wealthy from an old family, a brilliant horseman, a favorite in society. Young women adored him. Mothers schemed to secure him for their daughters. He was exactly the kind of man Anna would normally dismiss as frivolous. But the way he was looking at her was not frivolous. It was as if he had been waiting his entire life to see her step off that train. Countess Vronskaya approached, greeting Anna warmly. They exchanged pleasantries. Vronsky bowed, said something polite, but his eyes never left Anna's face. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt suddenly aware of every detail of her appearance, of how she must look to him. The moment stretched. And then from somewhere behind them, a terrible sound, a scream, shouts, the awful thud of something heavy hitting the ground. One of the railway workers had fallen, or been crushed. The details were confused. People were running, gathering, someone was calling for help. Anna turned pale, gripping her maid's arm. The man was dead, just like that. One moment alive, the next gone, his body broken on the tracks. Vronsky moved immediately, taking charge, giving orders, his military training evident. Anna watched him, watched the way he commanded respect, the way people obeyed him. But she also saw the dead man's wife, arrived too late, falling to her knees, screaming, and Anna felt the tragedy of it like a physical wound. That woman had woken up this morning beside her husband. Now she was alone. Life was so fragile, so arbitrary, so impossibly precious and short. Anna gave money for the widow, a generous amount more than was expected. Vronsky nodded approvingly. Their eyes met again. And in that moment, standing between life and death, Between the warm railway station and the cold Moscow morning, something passed between them that neither of them understood yet. A recognition, a possibility, a danger. Anna left for Steva's house in a daze. The dead man's face kept appearing in her mind. The widow's scream echoed in her ears. And underneath it all, quieter but insistent, was the memory of how Vronsky had looked at her. As if she were the only person in the world. As if she were something precious and rare and absolutely necessary. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself she was being foolish. She told herself she had come to Moscow to save her brother's marriage, to restore order, to do what was right. She had no idea that her own life, her perfect, proper, carefully constructed life, had just begun to crack. Steva and Dolly's home was beautiful and broken. The furniture was expensive, the children well-dressed, but there was an atmosphere of grief hanging over everything like smoke. Dolly's eyes were red from crying. The children were subdued, sensing their mother's pain even if they didn't understand its source. Steva himself looked genuinely wretched. He loved his wife in his careless way and hated seeing her suffer. But he also could not quite understand why what seemed to him a meaningless indiscretion should destroy their entire life together. Anna moved through the house like a gentle force of nature, calming the children, speaking quietly with Dolly, holding her while she cried. She did not judge Steva. She loved her brother despite his weaknesses, perhaps because of them. He was warm where Alexei was cold, spontaneous where Alexei was rigid, full of feeling where Alexei was full of duty. Anna understood both men, understood the value and the limitation of each approach to life. She worked patiently to help Dolly see that Steva's mistake was not a rejection of their love, just a moment of weakness, a lapse that meant nothing compared to their years together, their children, their life. It took days, long conversations, tears, reconciliations, and relapses. But slowly, painfully, the household began to heal. Dolly agreed to forgive, to try again, to believe that love was stronger than betrayal. Steva wept with relief and gratitude. The children laughed again. And Anna, watching it all, felt both satisfaction at having helped and a strange hollowness she could not explain. She had saved their marriage. She had done what was right. So why did she feel so empty? In the evenings, there were social obligations. Steva and Dolly wanted to thank Anna by including her in Moscow society, introducing her to friends, taking her to dinners. Anna went along, gracious as always, playing her role. And at one of these dinners, she met a young woman named Kitty S.H. Sherbatsky. Kitty was 18, fresh and lovely, and hopeful in the way only someone who has never been truly hurt can be. She had soft brown hair, bright eyes, and a sweetness about her that made everyone protective. Kitty was in love, though she had not said so to anyone. She was waiting, hoping, certain that any day now a certain gentleman would propose to her. That gentleman was Alexei Vronsky. Anna did not know this when she met Kitty and liked her immediately. The girl reminded Anna of herself at that age, full of dreams, believing that life would be kind, that love would come, that happiness was just around the corner. Anna was gentle with her, asked about her interests, her family, made her feel valued and seen. Kitty glowed under Anna's attention, thinking how wonderful it was to be noticed by such an elegant, sophisticated woman. But there was another man in Kitty's orbit, one she barely noticed. Konstantin Dmitrievich Levin had come to Moscow specifically to propose to Kitty. He was a childhood friend of her family, a landowner from the country, tall and awkward in society, more comfortable with peasants and farming than with ballroom conversation. Levin was intelligent, philosophical, deeply sincere, and completely in love with Kitty. He saw in her everything good and pure in the world. She was his ideal, his hope, his future. When he proposed in Kitty's home, stammering through his carefully prepared speech, she gently refused him. She liked him, she said. She valued his friendship, but she did not love him, not in that way. Her heart, though she did not confess it, belonged to Vronsky. She was certain he would propose soon, and she wanted to be free to accept. Levin left Moscow devastated, returning to his estate in the country, to the land he loved, to work that made sense, to a world where he understood the rules. He felt humiliated, heartbroken, foolish for hoping. The city had rejected him again. Beauty had rejected him again. He would bury himself in rural life, in farming and philosophy, in anything that might make him forget. Meanwhile, preparations were underway for the grand ball of the season. Everyone who mattered would be there. Kitty was radiant with anticipation. Surely, at the ball, surrounded by music and dancing and romance, Vronsky would finally speak. Anna agreed to attend. Steva and Dolly both encouraged her. "You've worked so hard to help us," they said. "You deserve an evening of pleasure. Wear your most beautiful gown. Dance. Enjoy yourself. You're young, Anna. You're allowed to have joy." Anna hesitated. Something in her resisted, some instinct warning her. But she pushed it aside. It was just a ball. What harm could come from a ball? She wore lilac, a color that made her dark hair and fair skin luminous. The gown was elegant, perfectly fitted, with delicate lace at the sleeves and throat. She looked stunning, and she knew it. When she entered the ballroom, conversations paused. Heads turned. Women assessed her with envy and admiration. Men stared with barely concealed desire. And across the room, Alexei Vronsky, who had been waiting near the entrance, watching for Kitty, forgot entirely why he was there. He saw only Anna. The ballroom was magnificent, chandeliers dripping with crystal, mirrors reflecting candlelight, music floating through air perfumed with flowers and expensive cologne. Couples swirled across the floor in perfect time. Young women laughed behind fans. Older women gossiped in corners. It was the kind of scene Anna had attended hundreds of times, the familiar choreography of high society. But tonight, something was different. Vronsky approached her, asking for a dance. She accepted, telling herself it was just politeness, just the expected thing. But when he took her hand, when he placed his other hand at her waist, when they began to move together to the music, she felt something that had never existed in her marriage, in her perfect life. Electricity, recognition, the sense that every cell in her body was waking up after years of sleep. They did not speak much. They did not need to. The dance said everything. The way he held her, firm but respectful. The way she followed his lead, effortless, natural. The way their eyes met and held, unable to look away. Everyone in the ballroom could see it. The connection between them was visible, undeniable, scandalous in its intensity. Kitty watched from the side of the room, her heart breaking in real time. She had worn her prettiest gown. She had waited all evening for Vronsky to ask her to dance. And now she understood with the terrible clarity of young heartbreak that he would never ask. He saw only Anna. Everyone saw only Anna. Kitty felt herself disappearing, becoming invisible, her dreams crumbling like sand. Anna, lost in the music, in the warmth of Vronsky's hand, in the way he looked at her as if she were the only real thing in a room full of shadows, did not notice Kitty's pain. She did not notice anything but him. The world had narrowed to just this dance, this moment, this man who saw her not as a wife or mother or society ornament, but as herself, as Anna, as a woman with desires and dreams and a soul that longed for something more than duty. When the music ended, they stood for a moment too long, still holding hands, not wanting to let go. Then propriety reasserted itself. They separated, he bowed, she curtsied. She moved away to speak with other guests. He was claimed by his friends. But across the crowded ballroom, their eyes kept finding each other. Kitty left early, pleading a headache, her mother anxious beside her. Anna saw them go and felt a ripple of concern, but it was distant, muted, overwhelmed by the chaos of feeling inside her. She danced with other partners, made conversation, smiled, played her role. But part of her was always aware of where Vronsky was, who he was speaking to, whether he was watching her. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. She was married, she had a son. She had a life waiting for her in Petersburg. This was just a moment, just a dance, just a passing attraction that meant nothing. She would leave Moscow tomorrow, return to her real life, and forget all of this foolishness. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. When she finally left the ball, in the early hours of morning, riding home in the carriage with Steva and Dolly, she was quiet. They chattered about who had danced with whom, what everyone was wearing, the latest gossip. Anna barely heard them. She was replaying the evening in her mind, the feel of Vronsky's hand, the way he had looked at her, the strange wild joy that had flooded through her veins. At home, preparing for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes were bright. She looked alive in a way she had not in years, perhaps ever, and that terrified her more than anything, because she understood, with sudden devastating clarity, what was happening to her. This was not just attraction. This was not just a momentary fascination. This was the beginning of something that could destroy everything she had built, everything she was supposed to be. She thought of Alexei, her husband, waiting in Petersburg. She thought of Seryaja, her son, her heart. She thought of duty and reputation and all the rules that governed women's lives. And then she thought of Vronsky and how he had made her feel like herself, like Anna for the first time in her life. Sleep did not come for a long time that night, and when it did, she dreamed of dancing, of hands holding hers, of eyes that saw into her soul and did not look away. The morning after the ball, Anna woke with her heart pounding, feeling guilt and shame wash over her like cold water. What had she done? She had danced with a man who was not her husband. She had felt things she had no right to feel. She had forgotten herself, forgotten Kitty, forgotten everything that mattered. It was madness. It had to stop. She decided to leave Moscow immediately, days earlier than planned. Stiva protested. "Stay longer," he said. "We've barely thanked you properly." But Anna was firm. She missed Seryaja, she said. She needed to return to her duties. Alexei would be expecting her. And so arrangements were made, luggage packed, farewells exchanged. Dolly embraced her, whispering thanks. "You saved us," she said. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Anna held her tight, feeling the warmth of gratitude, of having done good, of having fulfilled her role as sister and peacemaker. This was who she was. This was what mattered, not foolish attraction to a man she barely knew. But at the station, waiting to board the train, she saw him again. Vronsky stood on the platform, scanning the crowd, clearly searching for someone. When his eyes found Anna, relief and joy flooded his face. He came to her immediately, ignoring propriety, ignoring the curious looks from other travelers. He had to see her before she left, he said. He had to tell her, and here he paused, struggling for words, that meeting her had changed everything for him. That he could not stop thinking about her. That he knew she was married, knew this was impossible, but he had to speak the truth. He had to let her know. Anna should have been horrified. She should have cut him off, reminded him of her position, walked away with dignity and tact. But instead, she found herself telling the truth too, that she felt it also, that the ball had been, she could not finish the sentence. The air between them crackled with possibility and danger. The train whistle blew. Anna had to board. Vronsky asked if he could write to her. She hesitated, then shook her head. It would not be proper, she said. It would not be right. He nodded, understanding, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made clear words were unnecessary. Something had been acknowledged between them, something that could not be taken back. Anna boarded the train, found her compartment, sat by the window. As the train pulled away, she saw Vronsky standing on the platform, watching her leave, his face a mixture of longing and determination. And she knew with sinking certainty that this was not over, that he would find a way, that she wanted him to. The journey back to Petersburg passed in a blur. Anna tried to read, to sleep, to think about anything other than Vronsky. But his face kept appearing in her mind, the way he had looked at her, the honesty in his voice when he confessed his feelings, the sense that he truly saw her, understood her, knew her in a way Alexei never had and never would. When she arrived home, Alexei was waiting at the station to greet her. He looked exactly as he always did, tall, thin, formal, his face composed in its habitual expression of mild authority. He kissed her hand correctly, asked about her journey, commented on her appearance. Everything was proper, appropriate, exactly as it should be, and Anna felt nothing but revulsion. It shocked her, the violence of her reaction. This was her husband, the father of her child, a good man, by all accounts, respectable and decent. But standing beside him, after days of feeling alive and seen and desired, she felt as if she were being buried alive. His voice grated on her. His precise, careful way of speaking, which she had once found dignified, now seemed mechanical and dead. Even his ears, she found herself staring at his ears, which stuck out slightly from his head, and feeling a surge of irrational disgust. She told herself she was being unfair. She told herself this was just the aftermath of emotion, of the strangeness of travel, of missing Seryaja. Tomorrow everything would return to normal. But when they returned home, when she saw Seryaja running to her, wrapping his arms around her waist, crying, "Mama, Mama," with such pure joy she felt the guilt crush down on her with unbearable weight. This child needed her. This child loved her completely, trusted her absolutely. What kind of mother was she, to risk his happiness for a passing attraction, She threw herself into routine with desperate energy. She managed the household, attended social events, fulfilled all her obligations. She was charming at dinners, gracious to visitors, the perfect Petersburg wife. Alexei seemed satisfied. Everything appeared normal. But underneath, Anna was unraveling. She could not stop thinking about Vronsky. Dreams of him invaded her sleep. Memories of the ball played endlessly in her mind. She found herself staring out windows, forgetting conversations mid-sentence, her heart racing for no reason. She was waiting. Though she had told him not to write, though she had said goodbye, she was waiting for something to happen. And then, at a reception 2 weeks after her return, she looked across the room and saw him. Vronsky had followed her to Petersburg. Their eyes met across the crowded salon. Time seemed to stop. Everyone else faded to shadows. There was only him, only her, only the undeniable pull between them, like gravity, like magnetism, like fate. He made his way to her slowly, stopping to greet acquaintances, playing the part of a gentleman making social rounds. But every step brought him closer. And when he finally stood before her, bowing over her hand, his voice low and intimate beneath the noise of the party, he said simply, "I had to come, forgive me, but I had to." Anna knew she should be angry. She should send him away. She should protect her reputation, her marriage, her life. But instead she felt relief flood through her like warmth, like coming home, like waking up from a long sleep. He was here, he had come for her. She was not alone in this madness. They could not speak openly, too many watching eyes, too much at stake. But they found ways to see each other. Chance meetings at the theater. Both attending the same receptions, the same balls. Conversations that seemed casual to observers but were laden with meaning for the two of them. He told her about his mother, his military service, his dreams. She spoke about books she loved, ideas that interested her, feelings she had never shared with anyone. Alexei noticed nothing. Or if he did, he chose to ignore it, to trust in his wife's propriety, in the impossibility that someone of Anna's position would ever compromise herself. He went about his work, his government responsibilities, his careful navigation of political waters. He was busy, important, absorbed in matters of state. And Anna, left to herself, fell deeper and deeper into dangerous territory. Vronsky courted her with patience and intensity. He sent flowers without notes, gifts that could be explained away as tokens of friendship. He learned her schedule, arranging to be where she would be. He made himself indispensable to her happiness. And slowly, carefully, the boundaries between proper friendship and something more began to blur. In the ballrooms of Petersburg, people began to talk. Nothing definite, nothing proven, just the whispers that always surrounded a beautiful woman and an eligible man seen too often together. Anna's friends started making gentle comments. "Shouldn't you be more careful, dear? People might misunderstand. Think of your position." Anna knew they were right. She knew she was playing with fire, but she could not stop. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. Vronsky made her laugh, made her think, made her feel like herself rather than a role she was playing. With him, she did not have to be the perfect wife, the dutiful mother, the respectable society lady. She could just be Anna, messy, complicated, full of contradictions and desires. They had not crossed the final line. They had not become lovers in the physical sense, but emotionally, spiritually, they were already bound together. Anna knew it, Vronsky knew it, and increasingly, Petersburg society knew it too. One evening, at a dinner at the Karenin home, Alexei's old friend Princess Betsy made a pointed comment about Vronsky's constant presence in Anna's orbit. Alexei laughed it off. "Vronsky is a friend to our whole family," he said. Anna felt the discomfort of the other guests, the carefully neutral expressions that said more than words could. That night, lying beside Alexei in their bed, Anna stared at the ceiling and faced the truth. This could not continue. Something had to change. Either she had to end it with Vronsky, completely and finally, or she had to, but she could not even complete the thought. To leave her husband, her child, her life? Impossible, unthinkable. Women of her class did not do such things. But loving Vronsky while living with Alexei, maintaining this double existence, was tearing her apart. She was barely sleeping. Her nerves were frayed. She snapped at servants for no reason, then felt guilty and apologized. She held Seryaja too tight, kissed him too often, as if trying to store up love against some coming disaster. And through it all, Vronsky waited, patient but persistent, making clear without words that he would wait forever if necessary, that his devotion was absolute, that he saw her, knew her, loved her as she had never been loved before. The winter deepened. Snow covered Petersburg in white silence, and Anna stood at a crossroads, knowing she could not turn back but terrified to move forward, trapped between duty and desire, between the life she had built and the life she suddenly, desperately wanted. The affair began on a night in late February, during a snowstorm that blanketed Petersburg in white silence, when the carriage bringing Anna home from a reception broke down near Vronsky's apartments. It seemed like chance, like fate, like something inevitable that had simply been waiting for the right moment. Vronsky offered shelter while the carriage was repaired. Anna should have refused. She should have waited in the cold. She should have sent for another carriage. But she accepted, telling herself it was just practical, just sensible, just the obvious thing to do. His apartment was elegant, masculine, filled with books and military memorabilia and the scent of good tobacco. He offered her tea, built up the fire, was perfectly gentle and respectful. They sat and talked about everything and nothing, art, music, philosophy, dreams. The conversation flowed like water, natural and easy. Anna felt more at home in his apartment than she had ever felt in her own house. And then, at some point neither of them could later identify, talking became touching. A hand held too long, a gaze that lingered, a movement closer. And then his mouth was on hers, and she was kissing him back with a desperation that shocked them both, and all the careful boundaries they had maintained shattered completely. Afterwards, Anna felt no joy, only shame, overwhelming and absolute. She had committed adultery. She had broken her marriage vows. She had betrayed Alexei, betrayed Seryaja, betrayed everything she was supposed to be. She wept, and Vronsky held her, stroking her hair, telling her it would be all right. They would figure it out. He loved her. Everything would be all right. But Anna knew nothing would be all right again. She went home in the early morning, the world still dark, the snow still falling. The servants were asleep. Alexei was asleep. Seryaja was asleep. The house was quiet, peaceful, utterly undisturbed. No one knew what she had done. No one suspected that everything had changed. Anna moved through the following days like a ghost. She performed her duties mechanically, managing the household, caring for Seryaja, attending social functions. But inside she was in chaos. Guilt consumed her. Every time she looked at Alexei, she felt sick with shame. Every time Seryaja climbed into her lap, calling her mama with such trust and love, she wanted to weep. But she also could not stop seeing Vronsky. The affair, once begun, seemed to have its own momentum, its own terrible logic. She would tell herself each time was the last time. She would swear to end it, to confess to Alexei, to destroy herself if necessary, but at least to stop living this lie. But then she would see Vronsky, and all her resolutions would crumble. With him, she felt alive. Without him, she felt like she was suffocating. They met in secret, at friends' homes, at the theater during intermissions, at Vronsky's apartment when she could invent excuses to be away from home. They were not as careful as they should have been. The passion was too strong, the need too great. Petersburg began to whisper. Anna's name was mentioned with knowing smiles, with raised eyebrows, with the particular malice that society reserves for women who break the rules. Alexei heard the whispers. He could no longer ignore them. One evening he came to Anna's room. They had long since stopped sharing a bedroom, and asked her directly. "There is talk," he said, "about you and Count Vronsky. It must stop. I do not care if there is truth to it or not, but appearances must be maintained. You must be more discreet. You must think of my position, of our son, of propriety." Anna stared at him, amazed. He did not ask if the rumors were true. He did not ask if she loved Vronsky. He did not care about her feelings, her heart, her truth. He cared only about appearances, about his career, about what people would say. Something hardened in Anna in that moment. She promised to be more careful, and Alexei seemed satisfied. But inside, she felt the last threads connecting her to her marriage snap. This was what it came down to. Not love, not partnership, not mutual care, just propriety. Just the surface of things. She continued the affair with renewed desperation. If she was already damned, if her marriage was already dead in everything but name, then at least she would have this. At least she would have Vronsky's love, Vronsky's passion, Vronsky's complete and absolute devotion. And then she realized she was pregnant. The discovery came in late spring, With the ice melting on the Neva, the days growing longer, the whole city emerging from winter's grip. Anna had suspected for weeks, but had pushed the knowledge away, refusing to face it. But finally, she could deny it no longer. She was carrying Vronsky's child. Terror gripped her. This made everything real, undeniable, catastrophic. A baby would expose everything. Alexei would know. Society would know. She would be ruined completely and publicly. Seryaja would be shamed, marked by his mother's sin. And the child itself, what life could it have, born of adultery, illegitimate, carrying the stain of scandal? She told Vronsky in his apartment, watching his face carefully. For a moment she saw shock, then genuine joy, then quick calculation. He wanted to marry her, he said immediately. She must divorce Alexei. They would leave Russia if necessary. He would take care of everything. He loved her, he loved their child, they would make a life together. But Anna knew it was not that simple. Russian law did not easily grant divorces, especially not to women who had committed adultery. Even if Alexei agreed, which he would not, she would lose Seryaja. The law gave children to the father in cases of divorce. She would lose her son. For the first time, Anna faced the full cost of what she had done. She could not have both. She could not keep Seryaja and be with Vronsky. She could not maintain her position in society and follow her heart. Every path led to loss, to pain, to impossible choices. She told Vronsky she needed time to think. But time only made things worse. The pregnancy progressed. Her body changed. She had to lace her corsets tighter, wear looser gowns, avoid situations where anyone might notice. The effort of maintaining appearances, of lying constantly, of hiding the truth, exhausted her. And then came the horse race. It was the social event of the season, the officers' steeplechase, where the finest horsemen in Petersburg competed. Vronsky was riding his favorite mare, Frou-Frou, a beautiful, temperamental animal he had trained himself. All of society would be there. Alexei insisted Anna attend with him. It would look wrong if she stayed home, he said. People would talk. Anna went sick with anxiety. She had not told Vronsky she was coming. She sat in the stands beside Alexei, watching the horses parade, the riders in their bright colors, the crowd buzzing with excitement. And when she saw Vronsky on Frou-Frou, her heart contracted with fear. He looked so alive, so confident, so beautiful. She could not bear it if something happened to him. The race began. Horses thundered past, riders leaning forward, the crowd roaring. Vronsky was in the lead, Frou-Frou clearing jumps with grace and power. Anna watched, barely breathing, her hands gripping the rail in front of her. And then at a crucial jump, Vronsky made a mistake. A moment of miscalculation, a shift of weight at the wrong instant. Frou-Frou stumbled, fell through him. Anna screamed, rising from her seat, forgetting everything. Her husband beside her, the watching crowd, propriety, caution, everything but terror that Vronsky was hurt, that he might be dead. Alexei grabbed her arm, pulling her back down, his voice sharp with shock and anger. "Control yourself," he hissed. "People are staring." But Anna could not control herself. She watched as Vronsky got up, unhurt but devastated, as Frou-Frou lay broken on the ground, as they led the injured horse away. She saw his face, the agony of having hurt something he loved through his own carelessness. And she understood the metaphor. This was what they were doing, breaking beautiful things through mistakes and passion and recklessness. In the carriage ride home, Alexei's anger finally broke through his habitual composure. "You made a spectacle of yourself," he said. "Everyone saw your reaction. Everyone knows now. Everyone knows you are having an affair with Vronsky. Do you have any idea what you have done? To me, to our family, to yourself." And Anna, exhausted from lying, from hiding, from the impossible burden of her secret, told the truth. "I love him," she said simply. "I love Vronsky. I am pregnant with his child. I cannot live this lie anymore. I am sorry, Alexei. I am so sorry, but I love him." The silence that followed was absolute. The carriage rattled through Petersburg streets. Alexei sat frozen, his face drained of color, his hands clenched on his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, controlled, terrible in its precision. "You will not see him again," he said. "You will not leave this house without my permission. You will maintain appearances. As for the child, we will say it is mine. Society may suspect, but without proof, the scandal can be contained. You will do your duty, Anna. You will be my wife in name at least. And you will never, ever see Vronsky again." Anna stared at him, seeing the bars of her prison close around her, and she realized that the life she had known was over. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, and now she would pay the price, whatever it turned out to be. While Anna's life in Petersburg descended into crisis, hundreds of miles away in the countryside, Konstantin Levin was discovering a different kind of truth. After Kitty's rejection, Levin had returned to his estate, Pokrovskoe, heartbroken and humiliated. The land welcomed him back with the patience of something eternal, fields waiting to be plowed, forests thick with spring growth, peasants who knew him and respected him. Here, at least, Levin understood the rules. Here, his worth was measured not by social graces he lacked, but by the quality of his harvests, the welfare of his workers, the health of his livestock. Levin threw himself into farm work with desperate energy. He rose before dawn, spent days in the fields beside his peasants, experimented with new agricultural techniques, studied crop rotation and soil improvement. He wanted to create something good, something lasting. If he could not have love, at least he could have purpose. His estate manager thought him mad, a nobleman working like a common laborer, getting his hands dirty, sweating in the sun. But the peasants, after initial suspicion, came to respect him. He was not like other landowners who visited occasionally and gave orders. Levin lived with them, worked with them, understood their struggles because he shared them. In the evenings, exhausted from physical labor, Levin read philosophy. He grappled with questions of meaning, purpose, faith. How should one live? What made life worth living? The great thinkers offered different answers. Some said reason, some said faith, some said acceptance of suffering. Levin found wisdom in all of them but peace in none. He thought often of Anna Karenina, not romantically. He had loved only Kitty, but with a kind of wondering pity. He had met her briefly in Moscow, had seen her radiance, her intelligence, the way people were drawn to her. He had also seen in her eyes a restlessness he recognized, a sense of being trapped in a life that did not fit. News from Moscow and Petersburg came slowly to the countryside, but it came. Levin heard about Anna's affair with Vronsky, about the scandal, about her confession to her husband. The gossip was cruel, as it always was about women who transgressed. Anna was called a whore, a madwoman, a destroyer of families. Levin thought this profoundly unfair. Yes, she had broken her vows. But did that erase everything else she was? Her kindness, her passion, her courage in telling the truth? He thought about the different paths people took. Anna had chosen passion, risk, authenticity at any cost. He had chosen work, solitude, a quiet search for meaning. Neither path guaranteed happiness, but both paths were attempts, however flawed, to live honestly. Spring turned to summer. Levin's fields were thick with grain. His new farming methods were succeeding beyond expectation. He should have felt satisfied, proud. Instead, he felt the old restlessness return. Work was good, but it was not enough. Philosophy was valuable, but it could not fill the hollow place inside him. He was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely. Meanwhile, in Petersburg, Anna's situation grew more impossible by the day. Alexei had made his terms clear. She would live in his house as his wife. She would see Seryozha. He would not be cruel enough to deny her that. But she would not see Vronsky. She would not leave the house without his permission. She would do nothing to further embarrass him or damage his career. And when the child was born, it would be registered as Karenin to avoid the scandal of illegitimacy. Anna agreed because she had no choice. Vronsky wanted her to leave with him immediately, to run away together, to face society's judgment together. But she could not abandon Seryozha. The thought of leaving her son, of him growing up believing his mother had chosen a lover over him, was unbearable. So she stayed. She played the role of dutiful wife in public. She smiled at dinners, attended the theater with Alexei, maintained the perfect surface. But inside, she was dying. The pregnancy made her sick, made her emotional, made everything harder. She could not see Vronsky, could not even write to him without Alexei finding out. The isolation was crushing. She lived for the moments with Seryozha. Her son was 8 now, bright and sensitive, aware that something was wrong but too young to understand what. Anna held him close, read to him for hours, tried to pour a lifetime of love into every interaction. She memorized his face, his voice, his laugh, terrified of the day when she might lose him. At night, lying alone in her room, Alexei had moved to a separate wing of the house. Anna thought about Vronsky. Was he suffering as she was? Did he think of her? She imagined him at parties, surrounded by beautiful women, moving on with his life. The thought drove her mad with jealousy. Or she imagined him lonely and desperate, and that thought made her ache with longing. Either way, the separation was torture. The two paths, Anna's passionate, doomed pursuit of love and Levin's quiet search for meaning, had never seemed more different or more similar. Both were suffering, both were seeking. Both were trying to understand what made life worth living. In his fields, Levin watched his peasants work and had a sudden insight. These men did not worry about the meaning of life. They worked, ate, loved their families, prayed to God, and found that enough. Could simplicity be the answer? Could faith, unquestioning and complete, provide what philosophy could not? He tried to believe. He went to church, crossed himself, prayed. But the forms felt empty. He envied those who could simply accept, simply trust, simply rest in faith without needing to understand. But his mind would not let him. He had to question, to analyze, to search. In her room in Petersburg, Anna also prayed. Please, God, she whispered into the darkness. Please let this suffering end. Please protect Seryaja. Please let Vronsky still love me. Please help me. But the prayers felt like words thrown into a void. If God was listening, he did not answer. Summer deepened. Anna's pregnancy advanced. Her body swelled. She could no longer hide it, even with the loosest gowns. Alexei had told the necessary lies. His wife was expecting. They were delighted. It was a blessing. Society pretended to believe him, though the whispers never stopped. And then, in late summer, news came that changed everything. Vronsky's mother, Countess Vrenskaya, had fallen ill. Vronsky had to leave Petersburg to care for her. Before he left, he managed to get a letter to Anna through a trusted intermediary. The letter was passionate, desperate, full of love and frustration. He could not live like this, he wrote. He needed her. When he returned, they had to find a way. He would not accept this separation. He loved her too much. They were meant to be together, whatever the cost. Anna read the letter 100 times, crying, pressing it to her chest, memorizing every word. Then she burned it, terrified Alexei would find it. But the words stayed in her heart. Vronsky still loved her. She was not alone. When he returned, they would find a way. Alexei, watching his wife from a distance, felt something he had not expected: pity. She looked ill, haunted, barely eating, barely sleeping. Part of him wanted to relent, to show mercy. But his pride would not let him. She had humiliated him. She had broken their marriage. She did not deserve his compassion. Back in the countryside, Levin received a letter from his friend in Moscow. Kitty was there, the letter said, recovered from her heartbreak, matured by suffering, lovelier than ever. She asked about Levin, wondered how he was. Perhaps when Levin was next in Moscow, Levin's heart leaped. Could it be? Could Kitty have changed her mind? He told himself not to hope, not to be foolish. But hope, once kindled, is hard to extinguish. He began to think about returning to Moscow, about seeing her again, about the possibility that love, the quiet, steady kind rather than Anna's all-consuming passion, might still be possible for him. Two paths. One woman choosing passion and paying the price. One man choosing patience and waiting for peace. The summer ended. Autumn came with its golden light and falling leaves. And both Anna and Levin stood at crossroads, knowing that what came next would determine the shape of their entire lives. Anna, heavy with child, forbidden to see the man she loved, trapped in a marriage that was now a prison, felt her strength failing. She could not continue like this. Something had to break. Something had to change. And Levin, watching the harvest brought in, watching the natural cycle of growth and rest, began to believe that perhaps life's meaning was not in grand passions or philosophical insights, but in simple things: work, family, the turning of seasons, the continuity of life. Perhaps if he stopped searching so desperately, peace might find him. The paths diverged, but the questions remained the same. How should one live? What is worth suffering for? Where is happiness found? In following one's heart at any cost, or in accepting the limitations life imposes and finding contentment within them? The answers, for both Anna and Levin, were still to come. And the cost of those answers would be higher than either of them could yet imagine. The child came in October, when the leaves were falling and the first snow threatened. The labor was difficult, prolonged, agonizing. Anna, already weakened by months of stress and isolation, nearly died. For 3 days she hovered between life and death, delirious with fever, calling alternately for Vronsky and for Seryaja, saying things that made the doctors and nurses exchange worried glances. Alexei sat in his study, receiving updates, his face immobile. He had done his duty by calling the best doctors, ensuring his wife had every care, but he could not bring himself to sit at her bedside. The child she was bearing was not his. Every moment of this crisis reminded him of his humiliation. The baby was born, a girl, tiny and red-faced and wailing with indignation at the world. Anna held her for a moment, looked into the infant's face and wept. This child, conceived in passion, born into impossibility, would carry the weight of her mother's choices for her entire life. What kind of future could she have? What kind of mother had Anna been to bring a child into such circumstances? But then the fever worsened. Anna's condition deteriorated rapidly. The doctors spoke in hushed voices about sepsis, about complications, about preparing for the worst. Alexei was summoned to her bedside. "Your wife is dying," they said. "You should send for anyone she might wish to see." Alexei stood in the doorway of Anna's room, looking at his wife, pale, shaking, her beautiful face wasted with suffering. And despite everything, despite the betrayal and the humiliation and the anger, he felt his heart crack. This was Anna. He had married her when she was a girl. She had given him a son. She had tried in her way to be a good wife. And now she was dying, and it was terrible. He sent for Vronsky. The Count arrived wild-eyed, disheveled, having ridden through the night when he received the message. He and Alexei stood facing each other in the hallway, the husband and the lover, the two men who loved Anna in their different ways. Neither spoke, there was nothing to say. Alexei gestured toward Anna's room. "Go to her," he said quietly. "She is asking for you." Vronsky entered the bedroom like a man in a dream. Anna lay in the bed, barely conscious, her breathing labored. When she saw him, her eyes focused briefly and she smiled. A ghost of her radiant smile, weak but real. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything, for the pain. I loved you, I love you. Tell our daughter when she's old enough, tell her I loved her too." Vronsky knelt beside the bed, taking her hand, unable to speak through his tears. Anna's eyes moved to the doorway, where Alexei stood watching. And incredibly, impossibly, she reached her other hand toward her husband. "Alexei," she whispered, "forgive me, please, I never meant to hurt you. You deserved better. You deserved a wife who could love you as you needed. I couldn't be that. But I never wanted to cause you pain." Alexei came to the bed, stood on the other side from Vronsky, looked down at the woman he had married, the woman who had shattered his life, the woman who was dying. And something in him, some hard defensive wall he had built around his heart, crumbled. He took her hand. "It's all right," he said, his voice rough. "Rest now, Anna. Conserve your strength. Everything is forgiven. Everything will be all right." For a strange, transcendent moment, the three of them were connected, Anna in the center, holding both men's hands, united in suffering and love and the approach of death. The barriers between them dissolved. In the face of mortality, the social rules and pride and recriminations seemed suddenly unimportant. There was only human feeling, raw and honest and shared. The doctor brought the baby to Anna again. They thought she should see her daughter one more time, in case she did not survive the night. Anna looked at the infant with such love and such sorrow. "My little one," she whispered, "be strong, be braver than your mother, be wiser, be happy." That night was the longest of all their lives. Alexei and Vronsky kept vigil together, saying little, occasionally exchanging information with the doctors, waiting. Seryaja slept upstairs, unaware that his mother might be leaving him forever. And Anna drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes peaceful, sometimes tormented by fever dreams. And then, toward dawn, the fever broke. The crisis passed as mysteriously as it had come. Anna's breathing eased. Her color improved. By morning, she was weak but conscious, clearly recovering. The doctors were amazed. They had been certain she would die. It was a miracle, they said. God's mercy. Anna looked around the room, at the two men who had stayed all night, at the tiny bassinet holding her daughter, at the gray morning light coming through the windows. She had survived. She had been given another chance. But for what? To continue this impossible situation. In the days that followed, as Anna slowly regained her strength, a strange peace settled over the household. Alexei visited her room daily, asking after her health, speaking with distant politeness but genuine concern. Vronsky was permitted to visit, to see his daughter, to sit beside Anna's bed and hold her hand. It was as if the near-death experience had created a temporary truce, a suspension of normal rules. Anna named the baby Annie. Seryaja came to meet his baby sister, solemn and curious. He held the infant carefully, marveling at her tiny fingers, her dark eyes so like their mother's. He did not understand the complicated adult world that had brought Annie into existence. He only knew he had a sister now, and he would protect her. But as Anna grew stronger, reality reasserted itself. This could not continue. The situation was unsustainable. Alexei could not indefinitely allow his wife's lover to visit their home. Society could not indefinitely pretend that baby Annie was Karenin's child. Something had to change. Vronsky pressed Anna to leave with him. Now, he said, while Alexei is being merciful, take Annie. We'll go abroad to Italy anywhere. We'll make a life together. You almost died, Anna. Life is too short to waste in misery. But Anna looked at Seryaja, at her 8-year-old son who still needed his mother, and she could not. Not yet, she told Vronsky. Give me time. Let me be strong enough to travel. Let me figure out how to explain it to Seryaja. I will come, I promise, but not yet. Alexei, for his part, made a different decision. He told Anna she could go if she wished. He would not try to stop her, but if she left, she could take only Annie. Seryaja would remain with him, as was his legal right. Anna could visit occasionally if she was discreet, but Seryaja's home would be with his father. It was the choice Anna had been dreading, her son or her lover. The life she had built or the life she wanted, duty or passion, and she could not decide. She was paralyzed by the impossibility of it. Through the winter, she remained in Alexei's house, neither staying nor leaving, trapped in a limbo that satisfied no one. Vronsky grew frustrated, feeling she was choosing her son over him, over their future. Alexei grew colder, treating her with icy politeness, making clear she was tolerated rather than wanted. And Anna herself felt she was being torn in half, unable to please anyone, unable to find a path that did not require the sacrifice of something precious. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Levin had made his own decision. He returned to the city, sought out Kitty, and discovered that time and suffering had changed them both. Kitty had learned not to mistake glamour for depth. Levin had learned not to worship her as an impossible ideal, but to see her as a real person, flawed and human and lovable. They spoke honestly about their mistakes, their pain, their growth. And this time, when Levin asked if she could consider him, Kitty said yes. Their engagement was quiet, joyful, based not on passion, but on mutual respect and genuine affection. They planned a simple wedding, talked about their future on Levin's estate, about children and family, and the good simple life they would build together. It was everything Anna's love was not: steady, practical, socially acceptable, rooted in shared values rather than overwhelming feeling. When Anna heard the news, gossip traveled fast in Russian society, she felt an unexpected pang. Not jealousy exactly, but a kind of wistful longing. How different her life might have been if she had found this kind of love. If she had met someone like Levin instead of marrying Alexei. If she had been content with gentle affection instead of demanding passion. But it was too late for such thoughts. She had made her choices. The consequences were unfolding. And she stood at the center of her life, holding her infant daughter, missing her son who was just downstairs but increasingly distant, writing letters to her lover who was losing patience, living with a husband who despised her, and wondering how it had all gone so terribly, devastatingly wrong. The confession had brought a moment of grace, a possibility of forgiveness. But grace is temporary. Forgiveness must be sustained through daily choices. And none of them, not Anna, not Alexei, not Vronsky, knew how to live in this new reality they had created. The winter was long and dark, and Anna, recovered in body but broken in spirit, began to understand that surviving was not the same as living. She had another choice to make, and this time she could not delay it forever. In the spring, Anna finally made her choice. She could not continue living in Alexei's house, seeing the disgust in his eyes, feeling like a prisoner in her own home. She could not keep Vronsky waiting indefinitely, watching his love turn to resentment. And most painfully, she could not continue the half-life she was living, neither fully mother nor fully lover, failing at everything she tried to be. She told Alexei she was leaving. She would take Annie and go to live with Vronsky. She knew what this meant, giving up Suryaja, her position in society, her reputation, everything. But she could not breathe any more in the life she had been living. Alexei received the news with cold satisfaction. "So you have finally decided," he said. "Very well. Annie may go with you. She is, after all, not my child. But Suryaja remains here. That is not negotiable. He is my son, my heir. You may write to him occasionally. You may visit if I permit it and if you are discreet. But he will be raised in my house with proper values away from scandal." Anna begged. She wept. She offered anything, everything, if only she could keep her son. But Alexei was unmovable. The law was on his side. Society was on his side. And his hurt, his pride, his need to punish her made him cruel in a way he had never been before. The day Anna left was gray and cold, with rain threatening. She held Suryaja one last time, trying to memorize the feel of him, the smell of his hair, the sound of his voice. He did not understand what was happening, only that Mama was going away for a while, that he would stay with Papa, that everything would be all right. "I love you," Anna whispered into his hair, "more than anything in the world. Never forget that. Whatever you hear, whatever people say about me, remember that I love you, that I will always love you." Suryaja hugged her tight, confused by her intensity but trusting as children do. "I love you too, Mama. When will you come back?" Soon, Anna lied, her heart breaking. Very soon. She left Alexei's house with only Annie and a few belongings, getting into the carriage where Vronsky waited. As they drove away, she looked back at the windows, hoping to see Suryaja's face one last time. But the windows were dark, reflecting nothing but sky. Vronsky took her abroad to Italy first, where the scandal of Russian society could not reach them. They rented a villa outside Florence, surrounded by olive groves and cypress trees, with views of rolling hills and distant mountains. It should have been paradise. Vronsky was attentive, loving, grateful that she had finally chosen him. Annie thrived in the Italian sunshine. They had freedom, passion, beauty, everything they had fought for, but Anna could not be happy. She missed Suryaja with a physical ache that never eased. She wrote him letters constantly, pouring out her love, trying to maintain connection across the distance. But Alexei intercepted most of them. The few that reached Suryaja were censored, stripped of anything too emotional, reduced to bland pleasantries. And Suryaja's rare letters back, written under his father's supervision, were stiff and formal, the voice of a child being trained to forget his mother. Anna read them over and over, searching for any hint of her son's real feelings. But the words on the page told her nothing. He was slipping away from her. With every day that passed, she was becoming less real to him, less necessary, less loved. The grief consumed her. Vronsky tried to help, tried to comfort her, but he could not understand. He had no children. He could visit Russia whenever he wished. He had sacrificed social standing, yes, but he could regain it eventually. Men were forgiven for such things. But Anna had lost everything, and the loss of her son was a wound that would not heal. Their life together, which should have been joyful, became shadowed by her sadness. Vronsky grew frustrated. He had given up much for her. The least she could do was try to be happy, to make their sacrifice worth it. But Anna could not perform happiness. She had thought love would be enough. She had thought choosing passion over duty would set her free. Instead, she felt more trapped than ever, imprisoned by guilt and grief and irreversible choices. They returned to Russia after a year abroad, hoping that time had softened society's judgment, that they might find a way to live in their own country. They took a house in the countryside outside Moscow, avoiding Petersburg, where the scandal had been worst. Vronsky had friends in the military who welcomed them. Some of the more liberal-minded families visited, but most of society shunned them. Anna was a fallen woman. No respectable hostess would invite her. No decent family would let their daughters associate with her. The isolation was excruciating. Anna, who had once been the center of every ballroom, was now invisible. When she attended the theater, women turned their backs. When she walked in public gardens, conversations stopped, eyes stared, whispers followed. She tried to hold her head high to show she did not care, but she cared desperately. The judgment felt like a physical assault. And meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Konstantin, Levin, and Kitty were building a different kind of life. They had married in a simple ceremony, moved to Levin's estate, and settled into the rhythms of rural existence. Kitty adapted to country life with grace and good humor, learning to manage the household, to work with the peasant women, to find joy in simple pleasures. She was pregnant now, glowing with health and happiness, excited about the baby that would come. Levin had never been happier. The restless seeking that had tormented him for years had eased. He still questioned, still struggled with faith and meaning. But having Kitty beside him, building a family, working the land he loved, it gave him a foundation, a sense of purpose. They talked for hours in the evenings about everything and nothing. They laughed together. They were building something good. When news of Anna's situation reached them, Kitty felt unexpected sympathy. She remembered her own heartbreak over Vronsky, her jealousy of Anna at the ball. But time had brought wisdom. She understood now that Anna had not stolen Vronsky. He had never really been Kitty's to steal. And the price Anna had paid for following her heart was far higher than Kitty could have imagined. Should we invite her to visit? Kitty asked Levin one evening. She must be so lonely. If everyone shuns her, doesn't that only make things worse? Levin considered it. His instinct was always toward compassion, toward helping those who suffered. But he also worried about Kitty's reputation, about exposing her to scandal. In the end, they compromised. They would not make a public show of friendship, but if they encountered Anna, they would treat her with kindness and respect. That small gesture would have to be enough. Back in her country house, Anna grew increasingly desperate. Vronsky still loved her, but his life was becoming separate from hers. He had his horses, his farming experiments, his military friends. He could go into society, albeit a reduced circle, but Anna had nothing. She could not see her son. She could not go into society. She could not even visit with other women without risking their reputations. Her whole world had shrunk to the walls of her house and the few people who dared associate with a fallen woman. She became obsessed with Vronsky's movements. Where was he going? Who was he seeing? There were young, beautiful, respectable women in the families he visited. Women who could give him what Anna could not, children he could acknowledge, a wife he could be proud of in public, a future without scandal. What if he met one of these women and realized what a mistake he had made? What if he stopped loving her? Vronsky tried to reassure her. He loved only her, he said. He had given up everything for her. She had to trust him. But Anna's fear was irrational, fed by isolation and grief, and the terrible knowledge that she had destroyed her life for this love. And if the love ended, she would have nothing left at all. Then came the moment she had been longing for and dreading in equal measure. Alexei reluctantly agreed to let Anna visit Seryaja for his birthday. She could come to the house, spend an hour with him, give him his present. But she must leave before other guests arrived. She must not cause a scene. She must remember this was a privilege that could be revoked at any time. Anna prepared for the visit with the intensity of someone preparing for the most important meeting of their life. She chose her dress carefully, elegant but conservative, nothing that would scandalize. She bought Seryaja a beautiful present, a set of books she knew he would love. She practiced what she would say, how she would act, determined to be calm and cheerful so he would have happy memories of her. But when she arrived at the house, when she saw Seryaja, taller now, his face more mature, looking so much like his father, all her careful composure shattered. She swept him into her arms, kissing his face, his hands, his hair, crying and laughing at once. Seryaja was confused, uncomfortable with such emotion. He had been taught to be reserved, to control his feelings, and he barely remembered the demonstrative, passionate mother he had once known. She felt like a stranger to him, this weeping woman who claimed to love him so much but had chosen to leave. They sat together in the nursery where Anna had read to him so many years ago. She asked about his lessons, his friends, his life. He answered politely but distantly. There was a wall between them that Anna could not breach. She had been gone too long. He had learned to live without her. When the hour ended, when the servant came to say it was time for her to leave, Anna clung to Seryaja one more time. "I love you," she said desperately. "Please don't forget me. Please remember your mother loves you." Seryaja hugged her briefly, then pulled away. "Goodbye, Mama," he said, his voice careful and controlled. Anna left the house barely able to see through her tears. The visit, which she had hoped would comfort her, had only shown her how much she had lost. Seryaja was slipping away from her. Soon he would be gone entirely, just a memory, just a son she used to have. In the carriage back to Vronsky's house, Anna broke down completely. She had given up everything for love. And what had it brought her? Exile, isolation, the loss of her son, and a relationship with Vronsky that was slowly curdling under the weight of her desperation. She had thought passion would sustain her. She had thought love was enough, but it wasn't. It wasn't enough at all. And for the first time, Anna understood the terrible price of her choices not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality she would carry for the rest of her life. There was no going back. There was no redemption. There was only this, the life she had made, and the slow, grinding awareness that it would never be enough to fill the holes where her son, her position, her sense of self used to be. The months that followed were the slow erosion of everything Anna and Vronsky had built together. What had once been passionate love began to feel like mutual imprisonment. They were bound together not just by choice anymore, but by the consequences of their choice, by the bridges they had burned, the doors that had closed behind them, the impossibility of going back. Anna's mental state deteriorated visibly. She slept poorly, plagued by nightmares about Seryaja forgetting her, about Vronsky leaving her, about growing old and alone. She ate little, growing thin and pale. Her nerves were constantly on edge. Small things would set her off, a delayed letter, a change in Vronsky's expression, the sound of carriage wheels that might mean visitors who would not come to see her. She began taking opium to help her sleep. Just a little, she told herself, just enough to quiet her mind, to give her a few hours of peace, but the doses increased. The sleep the opium brought was thick and dreamless, a temporary escape from the reality she could no longer bear. Vronsky watched her decline with growing helplessness and frustration. He had given up his military career, his position in society, his freedom for this woman. He loved her still, at least he thought he did. It was hard to separate love from obligation now, from guilt, from the sunk cost of everything they had sacrificed. But the woman he had fallen in love with, radiant, intelligent, alive, was disappearing. In her place was someone he barely recognized, someone fragile and demanding and consumed by fears he could not assuage. He tried to be patient. He reminded himself that she had lost more than he had, her son, her entire social world. He tried to understand her pain, but understanding did not make it easier to live with. Her jealousy was suffocating. She questioned everywhere he went, everyone he spoke to. If he came home late, she accused him of being with another woman. If he seemed distant, she assumed he regretted their relationship. There was no reassurance that satisfied her, no proof of love that was enough. And yet, underneath her paranoia, Anna's fears were not entirely irrational. Vronsky had begun to feel trapped. He loved Anna, or the idea of Anna, or the investment he had made in Anna. But the daily reality of their life together was grinding him down. He missed his friends, his work, the sense of purpose that came from being part of something larger than himself. He had thought love would be enough, but love without a world to live in, love that had to sustain itself in isolation, was harder than he had imagined. They fought more often. Small disagreements escalated into bitter arguments. Anna would accuse him of not loving her anymore. Vronsky would point out with cold logic all the sacrifices he had made for her. She would weep. He would feel guilty and apologize. They would reconcile temporarily. And then the cycle would begin again. The only bright spot in their dark household was little Annie. At nearly 2 years old, she was a beautiful child, dark-haired and bright-eyed like her mother. Anna loved her fiercely, but even that love was complicated by grief. Every time she looked at Annie, she thought of Seryaja, of the years with him she had lost and would never get back. She tried to be a good mother to the daughter she had, but part of her was always elsewhere, mourning the son she could not have. Vronsky suggested they go abroad again. Perhaps a change of scenery would help, he said. They could go to Paris, to England, somewhere Anna might find a more liberal society, people less concerned with Russian scandal. But Anna refused. Going abroad would mean putting even more distance between herself and Seryaja. As long as they stayed in Russia, she could cling to the hope of seeing him again, of somehow restoring their relationship. Exile would make that impossible. So they stayed, trapped in their country house, in their dying relationship, in the consequences of choices they could not undo. Meanwhile, in his estate, Levin was experiencing the opposite trajectory, a life opening up rather than closing down. Kitty had given birth to their first child, a son they named Dmitri. The experience of becoming a father had shaken Levin to his core. Holding his newborn son, feeling the weight of that small life depending entirely on him, Levin understood responsibility and love in a way philosophy had never taught him. This was what mattered, not abstract questions about meaning, but this: feeding this child, protecting this child, building a world where this child could thrive. The birth had been difficult. Levin had paced outside the room, listening to Kitty's screams, terrified he would lose her. When the midwife finally emerged with the news that mother and baby were healthy, Levin had wept with relief. He understood in that moment what Anna must have felt giving birth to Annie while thinking she might die. What any parent felt, that terrible mix of love and fear, of bringing a vulnerable life into an uncertain world and somehow having to protect it. He was gentler with Anna after that in his thoughts. Yes, she had made mistakes, but she had been trying, in her flawed human way, to find happiness, to live authentically. Wasn't everyone trying to do the same? The only difference was that some people's mistakes were private, while Anna's had been public and therefore unforgivable by society's standards. Kitty, nursing their son, glowing with the exhausted joy of new motherhood, sometimes thought about Anna too. She wondered if Anna got to nurse Annie, or if wealthy mothers hired wet nurses for such things. She hoped Anna had that comfort, at least, that intimate bond of feeding your child, of being necessary to them in the most basic way. They discussed, in quiet evening conversations, the question that had no easy answer. Was it better to choose duty and find peace, or to choose passion and risk everything? Levin had chosen duty, or rather, he had chosen a love that aligned with duty, that fit into the structure of the life he wanted. Anna had chosen passion that destroyed the structure entirely. Neither choice was wrong, exactly. But the consequences were vastly different. Back in Anna's world, a crisis was building. Alexei sent word that he was planning to remarry, a younger woman from a good family, someone appropriate to his position. He wanted to formally legitimize the situation, to move on with his life. He asked Anna to consent to a divorce. For most people, this would have been welcome news. Divorce would free Anna, would allow her to marry Vronsky, to legitimize Annie, to at least partially restore her position. But Russian law was complicated. The guilty party in an adultery case, which Anna undeniably was, could not remarry while the wronged spouse lived. She could divorce Alexei, but she could never marry Vronsky. And worse, the divorce would formalize what had been implied but not legally confirmed, that Annie was illegitimate, that Anna was officially a fallen woman. And crucially, divorce would mean giving up any remaining claim to Seryaja. As long as she was technically still Alexei's wife, she could argue for occasional visits, for maintaining some role in her son's life. Divorced, she would have no rights at all. Alexei could cut her off completely, forbid her to ever see Seryaja again. Anna could not decide. Vronsky urged her to agree to the divorce. It would clarify their situation, he argued. They could live openly together without the ambiguity. But Anna kept delaying, asking for more time, unable to take the final step that would sever her last legal connection to her son. The indecision drove Vronsky to distraction. He felt like they were in limbo, unable to move forward or back, trapped in an impossible situation that Anna's refusal to choose was only making worse. His patience, worn thin by months of Anna's jealousy and depression, finally snapped. "You love your guilt more than you love me," he shouted during one argument. "You want to suffer to punish yourself. Fine, but don't expect me to suffer with you forever." The words cut Anna to the bone, because part of them was true. She did feel guilty. She did feel she deserved to suffer. And she did not know how to let go of the pain long enough to find any happiness in what she had. That night, Anna took a larger dose of opium than usual. Not to die, she didn't think she wanted to die, but to escape, to find some peace, to silence the voices in her head that told her she had ruined everything and everyone she touched. She woke in the morning groggy and sick, Vronsky standing over her with a frightened expression. "How much did you take?" he demanded. Anna, how much? She couldn't remember, didn't know, didn't care. The world felt distant, unreal. She moved through it like a ghost, barely present, barely alive. Vronsky, truly frightened now, sent for a doctor. The doctor examined Anna, noted her weight loss, her poor color, her trembling hands. He spoke to Vronsky privately. "Your wife," Vronsky did not correct him, "is suffering from severe melancholia. The opium is making it worse, not better. She needs rest, country air, perhaps a change of scene. Most of all, she needs something to live for, some purpose beyond her own unhappiness. But what could Anna live for? Not her son, he was lost to her. Not society, it had rejected her. Not even Vronsky anymore, it seemed. Their love, which had once been everything, had been corroded by circumstance and time, and the sheer difficulty of building a life on nothing but passion. She existed in a gray fog, going through motions, caring for Annie mechanically, speaking when spoken to, but not really present. Not really alive, just waiting, though she could not have said for what, for something to change, for some answer to appear, for the unbearable weight of her choices to somehow become bearable. And all the while, underneath everything, the thought kept returning, I have destroyed my life. I have lost my son. I have ruined the man who loved me. And I cannot even regret it completely, because what else could I have done? Stay in a loveless marriage forever. Live a lie until I died. I chose truth. I chose to follow my heart. And this is where truth and heart have led me, to this gray half-life, this exile, this slow death of everything I once was. There was no resolution to these thoughts, no comfort, only the endless circling of a mind trapped in its own creation, unable to escape, unable to accept, unable to find peace. Vronsky decided they needed a change. The isolation of country life was making Anna worse, he believed. If they returned to Moscow, if Anna could see more people, have more stimulation, perhaps she would improve. He convinced her that they should try, that they had nothing to lose. Anna agreed, though without enthusiasm. She had stopped hoping that anything would make her feel better. They took a house in Moscow, elegant but not ostentatious, in a respectable neighborhood. Vronsky immediately began reconnecting with old friends, attending his club, resuming something like his old life. Some men welcomed him back. Others were cool but polite. He was a man, after all. Men who kept mistresses or left their wives faced social consequences, but those consequences had limits. He would never hold high political office now, probably, but he could still have friends, clubs, a life. For Anna, it was completely different. The first test came when she tried to attend the opera. She and Vronsky had a box. He was still wealthy, could still afford such things. Anna dressed carefully, wearing a beautiful gown, arranging her hair in the latest style. She wanted to show society that she would not be cowed, that she had as much right to be there as anyone. But when they entered the theater, the reaction was immediate and brutal. Women she had once called friends turned away, refusing to acknowledge her. Men stared with a mixture of pity and lasciviousness. A fallen woman was fair game for improper attention. In the box next to theirs, a prominent society matron loudly instructed her daughters to look away, to not let their eyes be contaminated by the sight of such a creature. Anna sat through the first act with her head high, pretending not to notice. But during the interval, when everyone was walking and socializing, the full weight of her exclusion became impossible to ignore. No one approached their box. No one greeted her. People walked past as if she were invisible, or worse, as if she were something disgusting they had to avoid. Vronsky tried to shield her, tried to engage friends in conversation, to act as if everything were normal. But even his friends were uncomfortable. They spoke to him, but they did not acknowledge Anna. It was as if she did not exist. She left at the interval, unable to bear it any longer. Vronsky followed, angry at society's cruelty, but also, and this was worse, embarrassed. He loved Anna, but being seen with her publicly, facing the cuts and stares and whispers, was harder than he had anticipated. After that night, Anna stopped trying to go into society. What was the point? She had been declared invisible, erased from the world of respectable people. No amount of dignity or beautiful gowns would change that. She was marked, ruined, permanently outside the circles that had once defined her worth. But she could not simply stay home all the time either. She was only 28 years old, too young to live as a recluse, to give up entirely on life outside her house. So she found the shadows of society, the marginal spaces where women like her could exist. The bohemian artist circles that cared less about propriety. The foreign community that did not know or care about Russian scandal. The few liberal-minded people who made a point of receiving her as a matter of principle. It was something, but it was not her world. She did not belong there either. She was suspended between worlds, welcome in none, tolerated grudgingly in a few. And through it all, her hunger to see Seryaja only intensified. They were in the same city now. He was only a few miles away. The thought tormented her. She wrote to Alexei again and again, begging for permission to visit. Most letters went unanswered. The few replies were curt refusals. It would not be appropriate, Alexei wrote. Seryaja is settled in his routine. Your presence would only disturb him. Anna began to follow news about Seryaja obsessively. She learned from servants' gossip that he was excelling in his studies, that Alexei was proud of him, that he was growing tall and serious like his father. She heard he had a new tutor, a strict German who was teaching him mathematics and languages. Each detail was precious and painful, her son's life continuing without her, reshaping itself around her absence. Finally, she could bear it no longer. She would see him, with or without Alexei's permission. She knew his schedule. Alexei kept a rigid routine, and Seryaja was part of it. On Tuesday afternoons, the boy went for walks in the park with his governess. Anna could go there. It was a public place. No one could stop her from being in a public park. She went alone, telling Vronsky she had an errand. She knew he would try to stop her if she told him the truth. She dressed simply, trying to be inconspicuous, and positioned herself on a bench along the path where Seryaja usually walked. And then she saw him. He was 9 now, tall for his age, dressed in a little suit that made him look older than his years. He walked beside his governess, a stout woman Anna didn't recognize, listening politely to whatever she was telling him. His face was serious, thoughtful. He looked so much like Alexei it made Anna's heart ache. She stood up as they approached. Seryaja, she called softly. He looked up, saw her, and stopped walking. For a moment, recognition and joy flashed across his face. "Mama," he said. But then he caught himself, glanced at his governess, and his expression shuddered. Anna saw the training reassert itself, saw him remembering the rules he had been taught. He was not supposed to be glad to see her. His mother was someone to be ashamed of. The governess was flustered, clearly unsure what to do. Count Karenin had given strict instructions that Anna was not to be allowed contact. But this was a public park. She could not forcibly remove the boy from his own mother. Anna knelt down, bringing herself to Seryaja's level. "My darling," she said, her voice trembling, "how I've missed you. You've grown so tall. Let me look at you." Seryaja stood stiffly, allowing her to touch his face, his hands, but not responding to her affection. He seemed confused, torn between the mother he remembered loving and the shame he had been taught to feel. "Can we walk together?" Anna asked the governess. "Just for a few minutes." The governess hesitated, then nodded shortly. "5 minutes," she said. "I will be right here." Anna and Seryaja walked along the path. Anna tried to talk to him, to ask about his life, his studies, to re-establish some connection. But Seryaja answered in monosyllables, his responses polite but distant. He had been well trained. "Do not encourage her. Do not show attachment. Your mother left you. She chose someone else over you." Anna wanted to explain, to make him understand that she had never chosen anyone over him, that leaving had been the hardest thing she had ever done, that she loved him more than life itself. But how do you explain adult complications to a 9-year-old? How do you make a child understand that love is sometimes not enough, that life forces impossible choices, that mothers are human and flawed and capable of terrible mistakes? When the 5 minutes were up, the governess called Seryaja back firmly. The boy obeyed immediately, walking away from Anna without looking back. Anna watched him go, her vision blurred with tears, her heart broken all over again. She returned home to Vronsky's house barely able to speak. He saw her face and knew immediately where she had been. He was angry at first. She had gone behind his back, risked a confrontation. But when he saw her devastation, his anger melted into pity. He held her while she wept, but he felt helpless. There was nothing he could do to fix this, nothing he could say to make it better. Anna's relationship with her son was destroyed, and it was destroyed precisely because of the choice she had made to be with Vronsky. And they both knew it. Meanwhile, across Moscow, in Levin and Kitty's temporary residence, they were in the city for the winter season. Life was full of different kinds of challenges. Little Dmitri had fallen ill with a fever. Kitty was exhausted from nights of nursing him. Levin was wild with fear, convinced his son was dying. They sent for doctors, specialists, anyone who might help. And in those long nights, sitting by their son's bedside, Levin prayed with a desperation he had never known. He had spent years questioning faith, analyzing belief, wondering if God existed. But now, faced with his child's suffering, philosophy was useless. He prayed because he had to, because there was nothing else to do. Please, God, save him. Take me instead, just save my son. Dmitri recovered, the fever broke, the crisis passed. And Levin, watching his son sleep peacefully, had an epiphany. This was faith, not intellectual certainty, not logical proof. But this, the raw human need for something beyond yourself, the willingness to beg and bargain and believe because the alternative was unbearable. Faith was not something you proved, it was something you lived. And he thought of Anna again, of how she had lost her son not to death but to her own choices, how she lived every day with that loss. How did anyone survive such pain, faith, drugs, love? Or did you just endure, day after day, carrying a wound that would never heal? He had his son. Anna had lost hers, and the difference between their lives came down to this. He had chosen a love that fit within the rules, and she had chosen a love that broke them. The consequences were not fair, they were not proportional, but they were absolute, and there was no way to undo them. After the encounter in the park, Anna's mental state spiraled further downward. She became convinced that Seryaja hated her, that he would grow up ashamed of having her as a mother, that she had lost him completely and forever. The grief was physically painful, a constant ache in her chest that nothing could relieve. She increased her opium use, no longer even trying to hide it from Vronsky. The drug was the only thing that made life bearable, the only escape from the endless loop of guilt and longing and despair. Vronsky tried to intervene, to limit her access to the drug, but Anna would become hysterical, and he would give in, unable to bear her suffering. Their fights became more frequent and more vicious. Anna accused Vronsky of regretting their relationship, of wishing he had never met her, of staying with her only out of obligation. He denied it, but his denials lacked conviction, and truthfully he did not know any more what he felt. Love, duty, guilt, exhaustion, all of it mixed together into a confusing mess that made him want to escape, to ride his horses for hours, to be anywhere Anna was not. Anna, hypersensitive to every shift in his mood, interpreted his silences as rejection, his absences as betrayal. She began to watch him constantly, to question his every movement. Where are you going? Who will be there? When will you be back? The interrogations drove Vronsky to distraction. He felt like a prisoner, watched and judged and found wanting. One evening, Vronsky mentioned casually that his mother had invited them to visit her estate. It was an olive branch, a sign that his family might be willing to accept Anna, at least privately. Most women in Anna's position would have been grateful for any acceptance, any acknowledgement, but Anna immediately assumed the worst. Your mother hates me, she said. This is a trap. She wants to show you what you've given up, to parade eligible young women in front of you, to convince you to leave me. Vronsky tried to reassure her. His mother was genuinely trying to help, he said. They should accept the invitation, show gratitude, maybe build some bridges. But Anna refused absolutely. She would not put herself in a position to be judged and rejected again. She had had enough of that. The argument escalated. Vronsky's frustration boiled over. Do you want to be miserable? He shouted. Do you actively seek out reasons to suffer? I'm trying to help you and you throw it back in my face. I can't do anything right. Nothing I do is ever enough for you. Anna stared at him, seeing in his face what she had been dreading. He was tired of her. Tired of her sadness, her jealousy, her need. He wanted out but was too honorable to leave. And that was worse than if he had just stopped loving her. He stayed out of duty. She had become his burden. I should die, she said quietly. You would be happier if I died. You could mourn me respectably, then move on with your life. Marry some young, uncomplicated woman. Have the life you should have had. Vronsky was horrified. Don't say that, he said. Don't even think it. I love you, Anna. I chose you. We chose each other, but the words felt hollow. They both heard it. That night, Anna lay awake thinking about death. Not actively planning it, but considering it as a possibility, an escape, a solution to the unsolvable problem of her life. She was exhausted, tired of suffering, tired of making Vronsky suffer, tired of the endless guilt about Seryaja, tired of being shut out of society, tired of being herself. What if she just stopped? What if she ended the pain cleanly, mercifully for everyone? The thought was not new. It had been circling her mind for months, a dark undertow pulling at her. But now it had weight, substance, appeal. Death would be simpler than this endless half-life. At least in death, she could stop hurting people, stop disappointing them, stop failing at everything she tried to be. She did not decide anything that night, but the idea had taken root. And once you start seriously considering death as an option, it's hard to go back to seeing life as the only choice. The next morning, Vronsky announced he had to leave for a few days. His mother truly was ill, he said, and he needed to check on her. He would go alone. It was just a quick trip, no need for Anna to come. He would be back by Wednesday. Anna watched him pack with growing suspicion. Was his mother really ill? Or was this an excuse to get away from her? Would there be other people at his mother's estate? Young women. She wanted to demand answers, to forbid him from going. But she had just enough self-awareness left to know that would only prove Vronsky's point about her being impossible. So she said nothing, just watched him leave, feeling abandoned, feeling certain he would not come back, or if he did come back, it would be to tell her he was leaving for good. Alone with Annie and the servants, Anna descended into a paranoid spiral. Every scenario her mind conjured was terrible. Vronsky falling in love with someone else. Vronsky being grateful to be away from her and realizing how much better his life could be. Vronsky regretting everything they had done, everything they had sacrificed. She tried to distract herself. She played with Annie, but even that was painful. The child looked so much like Vronsky, reminded her constantly of what she might lose. She tried to read, but could not concentrate. The words swam on the page, meaningless. She tried to sleep, but nightmares woke her gasping. She wrote Vronsky letter after letter, pouring out her fears and accusations and apologies, then burning them all, knowing she sounded insane, that sending them would only drive him further away. But the need to communicate, to make him understand, was overwhelming. On Tuesday, she sent a telegram. "When are you returning?" She told herself it was a simple question, reasonable, the kind of thing any wife would ask. But the subtext was clear: "I don't trust you. I think you're lying to me. Come back now and prove I'm wrong." The reply came hours later. "Wednesday evening as planned. Do not worry, do not worry." As if worry were something she could control. As if she had not spent the last year slowly losing her mind from worry, from uncertainty, from the terrible knowledge that she had bet everything on Vronsky's love, and now that love seemed to be curdling into resentment. By Wednesday morning, Anna was barely functional. She had not slept. She looked haggard, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling. The servants gave her worried looks. Even Annie seemed to sense her mother's distress, clinging to her, whimpering. Anna took more opium, trying to calm herself. But instead of peace, the drug brought paranoia. She became convinced that Vronsky was not coming back at all, that he had lied. That he was, at this very moment, telling his mother he was leaving Anna, making plans for a new life that did not include his fallen woman and their illegitimate child. She had to see him, had to know. Could not wait for evening, for his return that might not happen. She sent another telegram to his mother's estate. "I need to see you immediately. Important, please come home." The reply, when it came, was curt: "Impossible. Will return this evening as promised." That word, impossible, felt like a slap. She was being dismissed, put off, treated as an inconvenience. Meanwhile, he was probably having a lovely time with his family, with respectable people, in a world she could never enter. He was being reminded of what he had given up for her, and when he returned, if he returned, it would be to tell her it was over. Anna could not breathe. The walls of the house seemed to be closing in. She needed air, needed to move, needed to do something. She decided to go to him. She would take the train to his mother's estate, surprise him, see for herself what he was doing, who he was with. It was irrational. She knew it was irrational. But the need to know, to see, was stronger than reason. She told the servants she was going out, dressed hurriedly, called for a carriage to take her to the railway station. The whole time, part of her mind was screaming that this was a mistake, that she was being crazy, that she would regret this. But she ignored that voice. She had to know, she had to see him. The carriage rattled through Moscow streets. Anna stared out the window, seeing nothing, her mind a chaos of fear and anger and desperation. What would she say to him when she arrived? What if he was angry that she had followed him? What if she found him with someone else? What if the life they had built together, paid for with so much sacrifice, was already over and she just hadn't accepted it yet? At the railway station, Anna went through the motions of buying a ticket, asking about trains, moving toward the platform. But her mind was somewhere else, running through scenarios, imagining confrontations, trying to prepare for every possible outcome. She did not notice the man offering to carry her bag, did not hear the announcement about train delays, did not see the other passengers giving her curious looks, this elegant woman, alone, looking distraught, clearly in some kind of distress. All she could think about was Vronsky, whether he still loved her, whether staying with him had been worth destroying her life, whether anything was worth this much pain. And underneath everything, quieter but insistent, was the thought she had been pushing away. What if I just ended this? What if I made it all stop? She stood on the platform, waiting for the train, and the thought grew louder. The train pulled into the station, its massive engine hissing steam, metal wheels screeching against rails. Passengers surged forward, eager to board, to get home, to continue their lives. Anna stood still, watching the movement around her, feeling utterly disconnected from it all. All these people with their destinations, their purposes, their futures. She had none of those things anymore. A worker walked past, carrying luggage, focused on his task. Anna watched him, thinking of the railway worker who had died the day she met Vronsky. A man alive one moment, crushed and gone the next. How quickly it could happen, how final it was. One step off the platform when the train was coming and everything would stop. The pain, the guilt, the endless circling thoughts, all of it would just stop. She noticed with strange detachment how easy it would be. The platform was crowded, no one was watching her. The train was moving, coming closer, still not at full stop. There was a gap between the cars. If someone were to step into that gap, it would look like an accident, a tragic stumble, a moment of carelessness. Vronsky would grieve, but he would also be free. Seryaja would be sad, but he was young, he would recover, would grow up without the stain of having a fallen woman for a mother. Annie was so little, she would not even remember her. Everyone would be better off. Anna took a step closer to the edge of the platform. The train was slowing now, preparing to stop, but it was still moving, still dangerous. The wheels were massive, unstoppable. If someone got in their path. She thought of Seryaja one last time. His face in the park, confused and distant, the boy who had once loved his mama, absolutely now taught to be ashamed of her. She had failed him, failed to be strong enough, wise enough to choose better. He deserved a better mother than she had been. She thought of Vronsky, of how he had looked at her at the ball, like she was precious, like she was everything. And how he looked at her now, with pity, with frustration, with the exhausted love of someone trapped by their own choices. She had made him sacrifice everything for her, and then had not been worth the sacrifice. He deserved to be free. She thought of Anna Karenina, the woman she had been, beautiful, respected, proper. That woman was dead already. What stood here on this platform was just a shell, a ghost, someone who had broken all the rules and found only misery on the other side. The train was almost past her now. This was the moment. Step forward and it would be over. And Anna, tired beyond measure, seeing no way forward and unable to go back, made her choice. She stepped off the platform. There was a moment, a split second, when she could have pulled back, when instinct might have saved her. But she did not pull back. She let gravity take her, let the inevitable happen. The impact was immediate, catastrophic. Pain exploded through her body, but only for an instant. Then there was darkness, heavy and complete. The thoughts that had tormented her, the guilt, the longing, the endless questions, finally stopped. Anna Arkadyevna Karenina, who had dared to love against the rules of society, who had chosen passion over duty, who had paid every price her choice demanded, and then one more was gone. The station erupted in chaos. Screams, people running, someone calling for help. Passengers who had been casually waiting for their trains now pressed forward, horrified, fascinated, unable to look away from the terrible scene. The train screeched to a stop. The conductor climbed down, his face pale. He had felt the impact, had known immediately what it meant. Workers rushed forward with stretchers, though everyone could see it was too late. There was nothing to be done. Among the crowd, someone recognized her. "That's Anna Karenina," they whispered, "Count Vronsky's mistress, the one who left her husband." And the whispers spread, the gossip immediate and merciless. Tragic, some said. Inevitable, said others. What did she expect, said the cruel. She brought it on herself. Word reached Vronsky within hours. He had just returned to Moscow, was actually on his way home to Anna when he heard. "There's been an accident at the station," someone told him. A woman. The description matched Anna. He should come immediately. Vronsky rode to the station like a madman, hoping against hope it was a mistake, that it was someone else, that Anna was safe at home. But when he arrived, when he saw her body, broken and still, he knew. Everything he had feared, everything he had been trying to prevent, it had happened anyway. The grief hit him like a physical blow. He had loved her. Despite everything, despite the difficulties and the fights and the exhaustion, he had loved her. And now she was gone, and it was permanent, and there was nothing he could do to fix it, to take back harsh words spoken, to make things better. But underneath the grief was guilt. He knew, how could he not know, that he had contributed to this. His frustration, his growing distance, his inability to make her happy, all of it had pushed her further into despair. He had seen her suffering and had not known how to help, or worse, had known and had grown too tired to try. Alexei was notified. He came to identify the body, his face a mask, impossible to read. He looked at Anna, at what remained of the woman he had married, the mother of his son, and felt a complex mix of emotions. Sorrow, yes, relief, perhaps, and a kind of resigned acceptance. She had been determined to destroy herself, one way or another. This was simply the final chapter of a story that had been heading toward tragedy for a long time. He arranged for the funeral, discreet and private. Anna had been orthodox. She should have proper rites, but the church was strict about suicides. If her death was ruled self-inflicted, she could not be buried in consecrated ground. Alexei used his influence to ensure the death was officially recorded as accidental. The railway was dangerous, people fell. It was a tragedy, not a sin. A few people attended the funeral. Vronsky, hollow-eyed and barely present. Stiva, weeping openly for his sister. Dali holding her brother-in-law's arm, thinking of how she had almost lost her own marriage, how Anna had saved it, how strange and terrible life was. A handful of others, the few who had remained loyal to Anna or at least pitied her. Seryaja was not allowed to attend. He was 9 years old, too young, Alexei said, to understand or process such things. The boy was told that his mother had died in an accident, that she was with God now, that he should pray for her soul. He accepted this with the solemnity children show toward things they don't fully understand. Years later, Seryaja would ask questions. He would want to know what his mother had been like, why she had left, what had happened to her. And Alexei would give him careful, edited answers designed to preserve the boy's innocence and his respect for his father. Anna would become, in Seryaja's memory, a beautiful, sad figure more myth than reality. He would grow up never quite knowing his mother, but always aware of her absence, of the hole in his life where she should have been. Little Annie, not yet 3, would remember nothing. She would be raised by Vronsky's sister, who was kind but proper, who made sure Annie understood that her mother had been troubled, that these things happened, that the past was better left in the past. Annie would grow up in the shadow of scandal, always slightly other, always marked by her origins. And Vronsky, who had loved Anna enough to give up everything for her but not enough, or not in the right way, to save her, carried the guilt for the rest of his life. He rejoined his regiment, requested assignment to the most dangerous posts, sought death in battle with the same determination Anna had sought it on the railway platform. But death, perversely, declined to take him. He survived wars, survived peacetime, survived into old age, carrying always the memory of the woman he had loved and failed. Meanwhile, in the countryside, Levin heard the news and felt a deep, aching sorrow. He had barely known Anna. Their lives had barely intersected, but her tragedy felt personal anyway because it was human, because it showed how fragile we all are, how easily life can break us, how few guardrails there are between living and dying, between hope and despair. He held Kitty close that night, grateful for her, for their son, for the simple, solid goodness of the life they had built. They had chosen safety where Anna had chosen passion. They had chosen conformity where Anna had chosen authenticity. And they had survived where Anna had not. Was one choice better than the other? Levin did not know. He knew only that he was grateful for what he had and heartbroken for what Anna had lost. All of it, her son, her love, her place in the world, and finally her life itself. All of it gone because she had dared to want something society said she could not have. In the grand scheme of things, Anna Karenina's death was a minor event. A sad story, a cautionary tale, but nothing that would change the world. Society continued exactly as before. the rules that had crushed her remained firmly in place. Other women would face the same impossible choices, the same harsh judgments. Nothing would change. But for those who had loved her, for Seryaja and Annie and Vronsky, and even, in his complicated way, for Alexei, the world had changed forever. There was a person-sized hole in it now, an absence that would never be filled, and they would all carry it, each in their own way, for the rest of their lives. The train that had ended Anna's life pulled out of the station, continuing its journey. The platform was cleaned, the crowd dispersed. Life went on as it always does. But somewhere in the gray space between memory and forgetting, Anna Karenina remained, a woman who had loved too much, suffered too deeply, and paid the ultimate price for daring to live by her own truth rather than society's lies. In the years that followed Anna's death, those who had known her continued their lives, shaped by her absence in ways both visible and invisible. Vronsky, as expected, sought redemption through service. He volunteered for the Russo-Turkish War, taking the most dangerous assignments, leading charges that more cautious men avoided. His fellow officers admired his bravery, called him fearless. But it was not courage that drove him into battle. It was the hope that a bullet or a blade might finally grant him the peace he could not find in living. But war, for all its violence, did not take him. He returned from campaign after campaign, decorated but hollow. Eventually, he resigned his commission, sold his estates, and wandered through Europe like a ghost. He never married, never fell in love again. Anna had been his one great passion, and he had failed her. That failure defined the rest of his life. Sometimes, in his travels, he would see a dark-haired woman in a crowd, and his heart would leap, for just an instant before reality reasserted itself. Anna was gone. No amount of grief or guilt would bring her back. Alexei Karenin, meanwhile, threw himself into his work with renewed intensity. His career flourished. He rose to positions of even greater influence, respected for his intelligence and dedication. He never remarried, partly from propriety, partly because he had no desire to repeat the experience of marriage. He raised Seryaja carefully, with attention to education and moral formation. The boy grew into a serious young man, intelligent like both his parents, with his father's reserve and, though Alexei tried to prevent it, something of his mother's intensity. When Seryaja was old enough, Alexei told him more about Anna. Not everything, but enough. He wanted his son to understand that his mother had been a complex person, not a villain, not a saint, just human. That she had loved him, that her choices had been tragic but not malicious. Seryaja absorbed this information quietly. He was old enough by then to understand nuance, to hold complicated truths. He grieved for the mother he had barely known, for the relationship they would never have. But he also forgave her, in the way that children eventually must forgive their parents for being flawed and human. Little Annie, raised by Vronsky's sister in the country, grew up sheltered from scandal, but aware of it in the way children always are. She knew her mother had died tragically. She knew her father still lived, but was too sad to care for her properly. She knew she was different from other children, marked by circumstances beyond her control. But Vronsky's sister was kind, and Annie's life was not unhappy. She grew into a quiet, thoughtful young woman who read extensively and thought deeply about human nature, suffering, and the complicated ways people tried to find happiness. When she was old enough, she asked to hear the full story of her parents, and the truth, when she received it, made her sad but also strangely peaceful. She understood her mother a little, understood the choice between safety and authenticity, between conformity and passion. She did not judge. How could she? She existed because of that choice. And Konstantin Levin, with his expanding family and his growing understanding of life, continued his journey toward something like wisdom. After hearing of Anna's death, Levin had grappled with the question that would not leave him alone. Why had Anna's path led to tragedy while his led to peace? Was it simply the different choices they made? Or was it something deeper, about gender, society, the different freedoms afforded to men and women? He recognized, with uncomfortable clarity, that his life would have been very different if he had been born female. If he, as a woman, had left a spouse to follow passion, society would have crushed him just as it had crushed Anna. His relative happiness was not just the result of good choices. It was also the result of privilege, of being male, of fitting, however awkwardly, into the structures society approved. This realization made him more compassionate. When he encountered other people making choices he did not understand, he tried to remember Anna. To remember that from the outside, lives look simple. Just make better choices, just be stronger, just don't make mistakes. But from the inside, lives are complicated, messy, full of impossible dilemmas where every option costs something precious. Kitty and Levin had more children, their house filled with noise and life and the beautiful chaos of family. Levin worked his land, improved his methods, wrote about agricultural reform. He remained restless intellectually, always questioning, always seeking. But he had learned to accept that some questions had no final answers. That faith was about living with uncertainty, about choosing to believe in goodness and meaning even when evidence was ambiguous. One evening, sitting by the fire with Kitty after the children were asleep, Levin spoke about Anna. He had been thinking about her all day, for no particular reason. Just remembering her face from that brief meeting in Moscow, the intelligence in her eyes, the restlessness he had recognized because he felt it too. She was trying to live authentically, Levin said, to be true to herself. That should be admired, shouldn't it? And yet it destroyed her. Kitty thought about this. I think, she said slowly, that Anna's tragedy was not that she chose passion over duty. It was that she could not forgive herself for the cost of that choice. She couldn't accept that loving Vronsky meant losing Seryaja. She wanted both. And when she couldn't have both, she couldn't live with what she had chosen. Levin nodded. That was wise. Kitty had grown in wisdom over the years, had learned to see human nature clearly without judgment. Perhaps, Levin said, the lesson is not that we should choose duty over passion or passion over duty, but that whatever we choose, we have to live with it, accept the costs, find meaning in what we have, not torture ourselves over what we lost. They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire, thinking about life's complexity, about the choices everyone makes, about how to live well in an imperfect world. And perhaps that was Anna's final gift to those who remembered her, this awareness. This understanding that life rarely offers perfect choices, that sometimes every option is impossible, that people make the best decisions they can with the information and strength they have, and that judgment is easy from the outside, but inside another person's life, nothing is simple. The world moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. Anna's story became a cautionary tale, whispered about at dinner parties, used to warn young women about the dangers of passion unchecked. The real Anna, complicated, loving, flawed human, was flattened into a moral lesson. But for those who had truly known her, she remained more than that. She was a reminder that beneath society's rules and structures were real people with real hearts and real pain. That the cost of transgression was not abstract but concrete, measured in lost children and lost selves and lost lives. And in his quiet way, Levin tried to honor her memory by living with more compassion, by judging less, by remembering that every person he met was fighting a battle he knew nothing about, by trying, in his small corner of the world, to create space for people to be human, to make mistakes, to be forgiven. Years passed. Levin's children grew. Seryaja attended university, studied law, made his father Seryaja and Annie never met. Alexei made sure of that, wanting his son untainted by association with scandal. But somewhere in the vast expanse of Russia, they both carried their mother with them. In Seryaja's tendency toward melancholy, in Annie's deep empathy, in the way both of them understood suffering perhaps too well for their years. And Vronsky, old now and tired, sat in a cafe in Paris one afternoon and saw a young woman who reminded him achingly of Anna. Not in looks particularly, but in presence. In the way she held herself, the intelligence in her face, the sense that she was fully alive and fully herself. He watched her for a moment, this stranger who was not Anna but could have been, and he felt the old grief wash over him one more time. But underneath the grief was something else. Gratitude, perhaps, that he had known love, even love that ended in tragedy, that he had, for a brief time, experienced something extraordinary. Anna had been right to choose authenticity over safety. The cost had been terrible, but the alternative, living a false life, never knowing real passion, dying without ever truly living, that would have been worse, wouldn't it? Vronsky could not answer that question with certainty. He knew only that he had loved Anna, that loving her had changed him forever, and that he would carry her memory until his own death, which could not come soon enough. The sun set over Paris. The young woman who was not Anna paid for her coffee and left, and Vronsky sat alone, an old man haunted by the past, waiting for a peace that might never come. But somewhere in the great mystery beyond death, perhaps Anna herself had found peace. Perhaps she was reunited with the parts of herself she had lost, the joy, the hope, the belief that life could be beautiful. Perhaps she watched over Seryaja and Annie, proud of the people they were becoming despite everything. Perhaps she had finally forgiven herself, or perhaps there was nothing after death but silence. The same silence that had finally granted her escape from unbearable pain. Either way, Anna Karenina's story was over. But its echoes would continue, in the lives she had touched, in the questions she had raised, in the reminder that every human heart contains depths of feeling that society's simple rules can never fully contain. And so our story comes to rest, like the last page of a book closing gently, like a candle flame settling into stillness. Anna's journey has shown us both the beauty and the danger of living according to the heart's truth. Her courage, her passion, her refusal to accept a half-life of pretense, these were not weaknesses. They were the very things that made her remarkable, that made her story worth telling more than a century after Tolstoy first set pen to paper. But Anna's story also shows us the terrible cost of authenticity in a world that demands conformity. She was caught between two impossible choices: stay in a loveless marriage and slowly die inside, or follow her heart and lose everything she loved. There was no good option, no path that did not require devastating sacrifice. And in the end, the weight of what she had lost became too heavy to bear. Tolstoy, in his wisdom, gave us not just Anna's story, but also Levin's, two paths through life, two attempts to answer the eternal question of how to live well. Anna sought meaning through passion, through the ultimate authenticity of loving without restraint. Levin sought meaning through family, faith, and the quiet rhythms of work and nature. Anna's path led to tragedy. Levin's led to peace. But both paths were valid attempts to find something real in a world full of false surfaces. The parallel stories remind us that happiness is not just about the choices we make, but about our ability to accept the consequences of those choices. Anna could not accept losing Seryaja, even though her choice to love Vronsky made that loss inevitable. The guilt consumed her. It poisoned her relationship, destroyed her peace, and ultimately took her life. Not because she chose wrongly, but because she could not forgive herself for the cost of her choice. Levin, by contrast, learned to accept life as it came, imperfect, complicated, full of questions without clear answers. He did not find absolute truth or perfect faith, but he found enough love, enough purpose, enough meaning to make life worth living. And perhaps that is the difference. Not that one chose correctly and one chose wrongly, but that one could live with ambiguity and one could not. There is profound compassion in Tolstoy's telling of Anna's story. He does not judge her, does not reduce her to a moral lesson about the wages of sin. He shows her as a full human being, loving, flawed, desperate, trying her best in impossible circumstances. He shows how society's harsh judgment of women, the double standards that punished Anna while barely inconveniencing Vronsky, contributed to her destruction. He shows how easily any of us could become her, given the wrong circumstances, the wrong choices, the wrong society. And he shows, through Levin's growth, that wisdom comes not from judging others, but from recognizing our shared humanity. That everyone is fighting battles we cannot see. That compassion, not condemnation, is the proper response to human suffering. What can we take from Anna's story as we prepare for sleep? Not that passion is wrong or duty is right. Not that we should play it safe or take more risks. But perhaps this, that life is complicated, that choices have consequences, and that the key to bearing those consequences is not perfection but acceptance. The ability to say, yes, this is what I chose, this is what it cost, and I will live with it as best I can. Anna could not do that. Her suffering was real and valid, but her inability to accept it made it unbearable. She tortured herself with what-ifs and if-onlys. She could not forgive herself for being human, for making mistakes, for wanting things that were incompatible. And that lack of self-forgiveness became a prison worse than any external judgment. So perhaps, as you drift toward sleep, you might think about your own choices, the paths you took and the paths you did not take. the things you have and the things you lost. And perhaps you might practice what Anna could not, forgiveness. Of yourself, of others, of life itself for being so complicated and difficult and full of impossible dilemmas. You are human. You are flawed, you make mistakes. You want things that conflict. You cause pain sometimes, even when you mean to cause only love. All of this is part of being alive. All of this is forgivable. Anna deserved forgiveness from society, from Vronsky, from Alexei, and most of all from herself. She was not a villain or a fool. She was a woman trying to live authentically in a world that punished women for exactly that. Her tragedy was not her fault alone. It was the fault of all those structures and rules and judgments that left no space for human complexity, for love that did not fit prescribed patterns, for lives that colored outside society's careful lines. And Levin's peace came not from following all the rules, but from finding a way to be himself within a structure he could accept, from building a life that honored both his need for meaning and his need for connection, from learning that the search for absolute answers was less important than the practice of love, work, and faith in the face of uncertainty. Two paths, different outcomes, but both paths walked by people trying their best, seeking happiness, wanting to matter, hoping to find some purpose in the brief span of years we are given. Sleep now, dear listener, knowing that your journey, whatever form it takes, is valid. Your questions matter. Your struggles are real. You're attempting to live well, even when you fail, even when you make mistakes. That attempt itself has value. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to have all the answers. You just need to keep trying, keep loving, keep forgiving yourself for being beautifully, impossibly human. Let Anna's story remind you that courage and tragedy often walk hand in hand, that the brave choice is not always the safe choice, that sometimes love costs everything, and we have to decide if it was worth it knowing we may never be sure of the answer. Let Levin's story remind you that peace is possible. That meaning can be found in simple things: family, work, nature, faith. That accepting life's mysteries rather than demanding certainty can lead to contentment. That the quiet path has its own kind of valor. And let both stories remind you that we are all connected in this grand, difficult, glorious experiment of being alive. That everyone you meet is carrying burdens you cannot see. That judgment helps no one, but compassion might save someone. That the line between triumph and tragedy is often thinner than we think. Tomorrow, you will wake to your own life, your own choices, your own path forward. But tonight, rest in the knowledge that you are doing your best. That your heart, for all its confusion and contradiction, is trying to lead you somewhere true. That mistakes are part of growth. That suffering, while painful, teaches compassion. That love, even love that ends in loss, is still love and therefore still precious. Anna loved fiercely and paid dearly. Levin loved steadily and found peace. You will love in your own way and walk your own path, and that is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Sleep well, dear friend. Let Anna and Levin and all their joys and sorrows rest gently in your dreams. Let their stories remind you that being human is complicated and beautiful and worth every moment of struggle. Tomorrow is another day. Tonight, rest. Rest in the knowledge that you are loved, you are forgiven, you are enough exactly as you are. Good night, sweet dreams. May you wake tomorrow with a heart a little lighter, a little kinder to yourself, a little more at peace with the magnificent complexity of being alive. Good night.